Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Decoded Live, our show for OutSystems developers featuring OutSystems developers. My name is Eliza, and I'm the community manager for OutSystems in North America. With me, as always, is my colleague Cecilia. I'll turn it over to her to introduce herself.
Thank you very much, Eliza. Hello, I am Cecilia Martinez. I am a developer advocate here on the advocacy team at OutSystems. It is super exciting to be kicking off episode 3 of Decoded Live, where we dig into the technical topics that are important to OutSystems developers like yourself. Now, before we dig into the topic today, which is going to be integrations. Now, this is a really interesting topic. It can be a little bit niche, but it's something that every OutSystems developer encounters. So we're really excited to talk more about it today. However, first, we do have some exciting updates to share with you. The first is that we're excited to announce the general availability of workflows for ODC. So workflows is a business process and workflow automation tool that allows you to create a workflow, which is a new asset type with an independent lifecycle similar to apps and libraries. The workflow editor in ODC Portal uses nodes that allows you to orchestrate start and end of workflows, human and automated activities, as well as decisions. And this is really useful for a wide variety of business use cases. For example, vacation approvals or a loan approval process. You can streamline tasks that require manual intervention. For example, if you need a human to review loan documents, you can assign that as a task for a user to complete in your application. You can also automate repetitive tasks and notifications, such as sending out loan approval notices. And you can also have multiple conditional paths to route processes based on certain criteria, such as having a loan approval path or a loan rejection path. You can check it out now. It's available in ODC. And you can also check out the link in the chat to learn more.
That is
Eliza?
so exciting. We've had 2 incredible developer days so far, one in New York City and one in Tokyo, but 2 more are yet to come. In just a few days, we'll be in Bengaluru, and in early September, we'll be in Kuala Lumpur. Register now for packed agendas featuring some ODC stuff, some O11 stuff, all delivered by OutSystems experts, both OutSystems team members and in the community.
Now, because we just love giving you as many opportunities to connect in person as possible, we want to make sure that we see every single one of you at one. The OutSystems Next Step experience is happening in Amsterdam, October 15th through 16th. This is your chance to see how organizations are modernizing their technology stack with OutSystems. You can see our latest product innovations. You can network with your peers and industry leaders, as well as hear success stories from our innovative customers. In addition, we also have a really special treat this year, which is free on-site certifications. Yes, so all you OutSystems developers that are interested in obtaining the ODC Associate certification or any specialized certification, you can do that, take the exam for free on-site, and come away from a certified OutSystems developer. In addition, we have some fun stuff lined up for you. We have our Neo Party, and we also have a swag store, so you can stock up on the latest t-shirts and other fun things to take back from Amsterdam. There is a promo code that ends today. It is that gets you 50% off of your ticket. So go over now to one.outsystems.com. We will drop the link in the chat, and make sure that you register and use that promo code BeachTime today to get your ticket, and we will see you there. So excited for that, Eliza.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Well, we think it's time for us to dig into the main event. So we have a really excited to bring in our expert panelists that we have today. So like I mentioned, integrations is an important topic for developers. It's also a bit of a tricky topic. So we have these experts to give their insights based on their hands-on experience, both building integrations, working with them, and implementing them into apps. So let's go ahead and welcome Orla Dijkink and Rúben Santos to the stage. Hello, how are y'all?
Hi.
Awesome. Great. Well, let's go ahead and start with a round of introductions. Orla, why don't we start with you? Tell us about yourself.
Yeah, I am the lead of the OutSystems squad at LINKIT. So we have a huge squad by now. We're 70 developers. I'm also an OutSystems MVP, and I've been using OutSystems for 9 years now.
Yeah, awesome. And Rúben, about you?
Okay, so I'm Rúben. I work at OutSystems for almost 6 years, and I'm at the demo team, a team in OutSystems that builds proof of concepts, integrations, and also some demos for the company to show to prospects and customers.
Awesome. Welcome to you both. So just as a reminder to the audience, we'll be taking questions from the chat at the end. So please ask away. Don't leave poor Miguel in the chat all alone posting links for us. So first up, our panelists, let's start with a couple fun icebreaker questions. Orla, you've worked with OutSystems for a long time, but I understand you used to be a COBOL developer. What was that like?
Yes, correct. I started out my career as a COBOL developer, and then it was kind of everything that I knew. So for me, it was normal. But when I started with OutSystems, I learned that it doesn't necessarily need to take a week to build a screen. Or if you have a bug on your screen, it takes you another week. So yeah, it was the switch was completely different.
Amazing. I'm glad we helped you out there. Rúben, we recently had a contest on social media where the developers shared their favorite OutSystems feature. What is your favorite feature?
In ODC, the deployment time that we have to change from to promote code from one stage to another, it's a huge feature that we have now in ODC. If you compare it to 11, 11 was already fast, but ODC it's in another level. So it's amazing.
Super exciting. So let's get down to business. First, I'd like to dig into the importance of integrations and how critical they are to the success of an OutSystems project. Orla, how often do you encounter integrations on your projects?
Well, I would say almost every project has integrations. I don't think I ever had a project without integrations. I usually have multiple integrations and multiple types of integrations in one project.
Nice, nice. Rúben, is there an average number of integrations you see for a given project, or does it vary?
As I said, I mainly work in proof of concept, so I don't have the experience recently of working in big projects. So, but talking about proof of concepts, it's mostly around 2, 3, and focus on proving that we can connect with external identity providers, external databases, SMS things, and stuff like that.
Very cool.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting, Rúben, to hear that even with proof of concepts, right, you're already dealing with 2 or 3 integrations right out of the bat. I think kind of for, kind of maybe people coming to OutSystems for the first time or going through training, they may be used to building standalone full stack applications because OutSystems can do a lot, right? It's really powerful. If you needed to, you could build everything within OutSystems and have really functional applications. However, in the real world, that's typically is not the case, right? Because we are working with other teams, other systems, existing data. Now, Orla, you mentioned that you don't think that you've had a project that didn't have an integration. Do you have an idea of, what was maybe the most number of integrations that you worked with on a given project that you've seen?
Oof. Well, there's usually a few REST integrations. Sometimes there's a database, an external database. Yeah, it can be. It's usually at least 3, 4 different integrations, and then every integration, of course, has a lot of different actions or methods. But yeah, I think at least 4 or 5 for a project.
Yeah. So that seems to align, Rúben, with the work that you're doing in the proof of concept space as well. So, I want to get a sense as we talk about integrations, and it's this really broad umbrella term, right? It covers a lot of different things. Orla already mentioned some Rust integrations. And so there's kind of different ways to categorize and talk about integrations. And maybe for some of the developers that are watching who haven't worked with as many, I'd like to dig into what some of those are. So Let's start with maybe some of the technical categories of types of integrations. And Rúben, we'll start with you. What are some of the categories or types of integrations that you see from a technical perspective? I think Orla already mentioned REST APIs, and maybe you can provide some other examples.
Sure. Now we already have the database, external database connections. We have the identity providers that now with ODC, it was a huge difference, because now you can have pre-built ways of integrating with, for example, Google, but you also have the OpenID Connect protocol that is available on ODC that lets you connect with different identity providers. If you want to bring some external libraries, .NET external libraries, you also have the external logic that help you, and you develop the codes on .NET and import on the OutSystems side, and it will map with the current actions that you need. For O11, you have the integration builder, that it's a huge help for us, and the integration studio to help you with .NET libraries.
Yeah, so you covered a lot there already, and some of those were, kind of technical, and some of them were a little bit functional as well. Obviously, you talked about external databases. I want to dig into that a little bit more. Do you typically see there's just, maybe one type of external database, or have you worked on apps or done proof of concepts or talked to users that have apps where they're connecting to different types of databases as well?
We work with a lot of external databases since Oracle. We have also the Postgres SQL. So it's a lot of them that we need to manage. Each customer, each prospect has their own. They want to see if we can do it, we can integrate with that, and that's mainly it.
Yeah, I had a feeling that might be the answer based on my experience. I think that seems to be one of the biggest challenges that gets presented, right? Is will it connect? Can I hook up this legacy system, this data source? Can I connect all of these together? Orla, so Rúben mentioned databases, authentication providers, as well as bringing in, external libraries. Are there other types or categories of integrations that you've seen or that you've worked with that he didn't mention?
Yeah, it usually depends on what. Well, of course, you have the everybody knows, like the Google ones, like Google Maps or things like that. But also depends on what legacy or what non-legacy applications they have, and it can be like CRM or Salesforce, SAP, those kind of. If you have something big, if it's good, you kind of want to extend on it. And then we can use integrations for that. That's very
I'm glad that you mentioned things like CRMs like Salesforce and SAP, because I think a lot of the power that comes from OutSystems, and the reason why integrations become so critical, is because a lot of times you are working with these large systems, and a lot of times they may not always talk to each other. So OutSystems has to be that connector to make it all work. So I think we kind of covered a lot of the categories and types of integrations, and we also talked about why they're important. Obviously, they're in every single application that gets built. So I want to now dive into the nuts and bolts of how they work. How do we work with them? How do we make them the best way that we can? So Rúben, I'd love to hear more about your integration lab experience and what that's been like and what you're working on.
Okay, so on the demo team, I'm responsible for managing the integration labs. And for the ones that don't know what it is, it's a place where we have a lot of assets, nearly 80 assets of integrations with external providers and third-party providers, to prove that OutSystems can integrate with those assets. And usually we are looking at the market and see what is needed for now, and we try to implement it and to prove that we have the capability to do it.
And does that typically come from conversations with users, people asking questions? Is it something that you're building things out yourself and you do research and just find things? What does that process look like?
It's a mix of both of them. So usually we have our sales team that says, we are hearing a lot about this type of integration. Do you think that we can do something like that? And we hands on and try to build it. Other times we just hear from the market, we hear the news, and we try to do it by ourselves and make it available to everyone.
Okay, great. And you mentioned that there are now almost 80 integrations in the integrations lab. Is there a recent release or like that you can talk about or that you'd like to share more about?
Yes, recently we released an integration with Okta. That is it looks like an identity provider. And what we did was using the OpenID Connect protocol, integrate with an OutSystems application where you can log in using Okta and manage your users on the Okta site.
Awesome. Yeah, I know that's a really big one. So authentications also sometimes can be a bit of a hot topic, whether you roll your own, whether you're using a specific provider or not, whether you're using some of the built-in like user capabilities within OutSystems. And so I think deciding which one to go with depends a lot on the project, right? Mm-hmm. And I think choosing which method to integrate also can be a big decision, right? So Orla mentioned REST APIs. We talked about integration lab. There's a couple of different approaches for building out your integrations in OutSystems, right? Can you, Rúben, just give us a quick rundown of some of the other options that we haven't discussed for how you can integrate with your app?
So we already have some of them built in, like we said. The identity providers now are one of them, and it's a huge difference between O11 and ODC because in ODC you have everything pre-built, so it's much easier for us to create an identity provider connection. For the databases, very similar. It's way easier now, but you also have in O11 the integration builder that was a big speed up to the development, and it depends. So if it's pre-built, it's easier. So you don't have to dig up on a lot of documentation. If you're like uploading a new external library, a .NET external library, it will be different.
That makes sense. And Orla, do you agree? I mean, do you prefer to use a built-in whenever possible, or is there a certain type of integration method that you prefer?
No, usually if it's built in, it's easier. I think that the hardest thing also with integrations is authentication, authorization. And if it's already built in, then some part of that is already fixed for you. So you don't have to deal with that. And yeah, so if that's possible, I would definitely use that.
Nice, nice. So, Rúben, what are some of the considerations when deciding what method to use? Is it always based on the sort of technical specifications, or are there organizational aspects to consider as well?
The technical is very important, but in my case, that we're working with prospects and customers, so it's usually it's the organizational method that they want. So we want to not letting them go away what they are used to it. So we try to follow what they already have and try to implement to be similar what they have. But if we need to go to a different technical approach, it is what it is.
Sure.
Yeah, sometimes we I know in my experience, it just kind of depends. Sometimes you have to guide people in the right direction because with great flexibility and power comes some responsibility, right? To make sure that you're building it the right way.
Exactly.
Orla, have you seen that as well? Is it typically the project that decides the integration, or are there other things that come into play, such as the skill on the team or preferences from leadership, anything like that that could impact the decision?
Usually it's the project that decides. Once we decided like, no, we actually should do something different. Then it was an elastic database, and we needed for flexibility for speed, but then we actually had to get trained also. So it costs more time, and it takes some investment from the organization. But other considerations can also be for certain, if you need another team to develop your integration for you, if they need to create a REST API and they don't have time, then maybe it can be better to use a database connection. And then you build your own integration, your own queries, and you're not as dependent on other teams. So that can also be a consideration, especially when speed is important.
That's a really good point. Yeah, so it's not just necessarily the technical requirements, but how quickly are you able to build this integration with the skills that you already have? And I think one thing that you mentioned that I really want to key in on is maintenance, right? Because that can come up a lot, especially if there's different teams or even different organizations that are working on an app. Is how is this going to be maintained? Who is going to be responsible for that? And that can be a huge, huge factor in the decision making. So great point there, Orla. I want to shift a little bit now and talk about some challenges, because I have a feeling that you all have faced some challenges with integrations, because I think we all do at some point. We try to make it as easy as possible, but issues do crop up for a variety of different reasons. Orla, I'll start with you. Is there a particular challenge that you've faced with an integration that you've experienced before, or maybe there's a certain type of challenge that you've encountered multiple times when it comes to integrations?
I think there's two challenges that always keep popping up. One is lack of documentation or lack of good documentation. And that happens especially in organizations. They created something and then the team that's responsible for it forgets to update it, documentation, things like that. But even on like very big public APIs, Google, Facebook, you find a tutorial or something, you follow it and it doesn't work. It's not how it's supposed to work. So that's always a challenge when you run into it. And the other one is authentication, authorization, because most, especially APIs, have some form of authorization. And that can be a challenge, and it's usually connected to how the infrastructure is set up or how the firewalls in the company are set up, then you're outside of the OutSystems platform and you're kind of let loose in the organization, and that can be quite challenging.
Is there a specific example that you can give of like an authentication related challenge that you've experienced?
One of the first integrations I had to build, so this was almost 9 years ago, we had to build a connection with SharePoint, and we set it up how it's supposed to be, and we never got through. And I think it took us weeks and a few teams to see where the issue was. Was it on the SharePoint side? Was it on our side? Was it in the firewall? And I think it took us a few weeks before we had that figured out. And that means you cannot develop on it. As long as you don't have that integration set up, you cannot do anything. So you're just waiting. So that was a challenge. But there was also not really documentation or anything at that point.
I don't want to name names, but I too have experienced lack of or inaccurate documentation from some very big tools that you would not expect. And so I feel your pain there for sure, getting all the way and having it set up and turning out that, oh, no, I was supposed to do something totally different from the beginning. So it's something that I think we've all gone through. So Rúben, any integration challenges that you typically face that you've seen?
So integrations, we most of the time we spend more time reading and trying to figure out what to do. But when we start doing, usually it's most of the things that Orla said. So lack of documentation. We try to figure out what we need to do, and sometimes we have a very good tutorial, we think, but it's not that good, and we have to go other way around, try to understand. Spend a lot of time on the internet searching how can we do it. So this is the most challenging thing, because at the end we can do mostly everything. So it's just a matter of the time that we spend trying to figure out how to do it instead of doing it.
Makes sense. So to sort of redirect back toward OutSystems, how have you seen the OutSystems platform evolve, Rúben, to address some of the more common challenges? Like, we can't really fix bad documentation, but what else has OutSystems sort of done to help?
Yeah, I referenced already a lot of them. So the difference between O11 and ODC, you have a lot of pre-built things that help us a lot. So external database is one of them. So it's easier, much way easier than we had in O11. So we have most of the things pre-built. You just need to put the right configurations there, and it's like magic. You see all the entities there that you want. You can select them. The same with identity providers. It's a really good change that we had from O11 to ODC, and it's mainly it. If we have pre-built, it's way easier for us, the developers, to build it.
That's kind of basing on that. I know OutSystems does a lot to address some of these challenges, and I'm curious if the challenges that you see are typically more of a result of the method of connection, such as whether it's a built-in connector or if it's a REST API versus the type of integration, if it's like a database or an authentication platform. Do you typically see that maybe REST or APIs are more problematic, or do you typically see that it has to do more with whether it's authentication or database? Orla, I'll kick that one to you first.
I think for me, there are a lot of more REST APIs out there in the world, and there's a lot more specific ones. So I think there will be more issues, different issues with them. But I think you get issues always because there's always some form of authentication and lack of even on external databases you have lack of documentation, like not understandable column names, things like that, data that you're not expecting to be like that. So you always get issues with everything, I think, if it's not set up properly.
Right. So yeah, that's some good insight there. And I think we've covered a lot so far, and I want to make sure that we have some time for a couple more questions before we get to the Q&A. I have seen some questions kind of pop up in the chat. But what are some best practices that you'd recommend people to keep in mind when they build an integration? Rúben, let's start with you.
So choose a stable version, what you're trying to implement. Don't go to projects that are not finished. Try to, when you're building it, try to comment everything, because you never know who's going to touch your code. So it's helpful to even to other teams inside your company that will touch on that later. So it will be good to have everything common, and be aware of authentication issues. You always have them in the REST API. So and each API is different from one another. So it's the best practice for that.
Wise words, for sure. Orla, anything you'd like to add to that?
Well, identify other parties involved as soon as possible and involve them as soon as possible, because you're going to need them, whether you're creating APIs or you're consuming them. You're going to need other parties to solve issues, to check things for you, and the more upfront you can do it, the better.
Definitely. On that, how important is it to communicate with other teams, and which teams are you talking to when dealing with integrations? Go ahead, Orla.
Yeah, I think that of course, if it's another team building it, you're involved with that team to understand things or to change things, but also a lot on the infrastructure side, so or security. I think that's a very important part that sometimes people forget, that you also need to get to the other side of the integration. So yeah, and depends how the infrastructure is set up. If you have like an integration bus, or if it's just endpoints and you need to figure out everything for new, or if there's already a connection to that other application or platform, but more on the infrastructure side, I would say.
Sure. Makes sense. So, developers that are new to OutSystems or learning the platform may focus initially on standalone apps, though I hear you that you come across them rarely. Let's talk about how developers can learn more about integrations. Orla, how did you develop your integration skills?
Yeah, when I started, the whole learning platform of OutSystems was not as big as it is now. So I think I just learned that there are REST APIs and a very basic, simple integration. So I mostly learned to trial and error, yeah, and Googling. Later on, I just started trying out things for myself. I wanted to understand more, and then I just built my own apps and integrating with things like Facebook or Google. Things you already have your own accounts for, and then you can build connectors, integrations. And the very important one, the Forge. Just look up different types of integrations and connectors and see how they do it. I used to do that a lot, and I learned a lot from that. Yeah.
Nice. Are there any resources you found helpful or would recommend outside the Forge? So websites, anything
Well,
like that?
of course, OutSystems Learn. Like, there's so much there now, and a lot of videos. But there's also a lot of content online. You have the OutSystems blog. There's a lot of information there. A lot of companies have blogs that they write things that you can learn from. And I use a lot itnext.io. It's a Medium platform, and where everybody can write for and publish articles too. And so there's a very wide range of articles there.
Nice. Rúben, what resources do you find yourself recommending to developers?
So you have the OutSystems course and lessons, so use it. But it's mostly for the integration, it's learning by doing. So go to Postman, goes to Visual Studio, try to implement it, fail, and you need to fail to learn how to do it right. So it's mainly it.
Nice. Nice. Okay, so we mentioned the Forge. I think we have to get into that a little bit more. I'd love to know what your favorite Forge component is. If it's just something that taught you a lot, if it's something you use all the time, whatever. I'll start with you, Orla.
Well, I learned a lot from like the Facebook connectors, the Google connectors, because they were there very, very early in the Forge, and I think they were kind of the first connectors and the first things that I learned about OAuth and that kind of stuff. So yeah, I used them in the beginning a lot. Now not so much anymore, but I use them a lot.
Nice, nice. Rúben?
So I'll be suspect because I helped develop some of them. So, but the AWS Forge components, it's the ones that we use a lot, and we help develop them. So it's the ones that we like.
Nice, nice.
That makes a lot of sense. Awesome. Well, we do have some questions that I'd like to get to from the chat. And so we can go ahead and turn to that next. So the first question is, if you had a magic wand, what would you change in the IDE to help create, test, or troubleshoot integrations faster? So I'd like to, use your imagination, right? Like, let's be creative with this one. Orla, I'll start with you. What would be really helpful for you to have in the IDE?
To troubleshoot the authentication easier. Usually now when something goes wrong, I have to write, I don't know what's going wrong or where it's going wrong or what is sent, and then you have to on before request and on after response, and like try to get some data, extra information, and you have to do a lot of developing just to get to that information. It would be good if you could see that a little bit easier without having to build that logic, because you don't need it afterwards. It's just for debugging.
Yeah, it's actually, before I go to Rúben, I want to follow up on that, Orla. How do you currently, what are some of your best practices for testing your integrations? Is it kind of manual temporary setups and then breaking that down, or what have you found works well?
Yeah, it's either that or indeed, as Rúben said, go to Postman, see if it works there, and then see what trying to find out what the difference is. And what am I doing wrong? What is OutSystems sending differently? Trying to get the headers the similar and see what the issue is. That also works really well.
Yeah. I always think of, I did science experiments as a kid, and you try to change one variable at a time, just one little thing, and see if that fixed it, right? So still applies here to this day. So
Yeah.
Now, Rúben,
Get a
what
working thing and then.
exactly, and go from there. Okay, so then let's throw the question to you now, Rúben. What, if you had a magic wand, what would you like to see in the IDE and ODC Studio to make working with integrations easier?
I would say on the rest and surfing the wave a little bit of Orla talked before. So having like a Postman view on the REST APIs, it will be kind of similar to what we have in Postman, like to simulate the calls and so on the IDE. It will be awesome, and it will be a good help for us that we're trying to trial and error to see if it works, and we have to go to a place and now to another place. Having everything on the same side, it will be really good.
Awesome. Well, we won't hold the product team to it, but I hope that they're taking notes, and maybe we could see if we can get that going someday. So, all right. So the next question that we have from the chat is, what is the external system connector you missed the most in ODC? I'm assuming this is one that you'd like to see in ODC. Rúben, we'll start with you for this question.
In ODC. So talking about for example, the external logic that we have now in ODC, I think that what we had in 011, the integration studio, was more visually appealing, because when you submit it on the Visual Studio, you would see things changing on the integration studio. And right now on ODC, it's a little bit different. The way of implementing, I think it's better, because it will be similar to all the libraries that you'll try to implement. But visually, in terms of probably user experience in 011, it was better, because you submit it, you see it changing and creating things on the other side.
Yeah. And how quickly have you seen ODC changing and like working to, I mean, I know you mentioned that there's almost 80 integrations now in the integration lab. Do you see that like rapidly kind of not necessarily catching up, because some of them are different, but getting to that parity point with 011?
Yeah, so in ODC it's pretty fast, so we don't have ends to do it, all of them. So we're trying, the release a new thing, we're trying to implement it, to show that how we can do it, and it's way faster. And you have now, for example, something that it's not in the ODC portal, but it's something that you can consult. That is the AI agent builder, and it's something that is being constantly updated, and you have news. I'm not going to say each month, but nearly each month you have news, new sample apps, new things that you can try. So it's way faster.
Yeah, I almost have trouble keeping up myself. So it's yeah. Great. So we have time, I think, for one more question. This one comes from Miguel. So thank you, Miguel. What's your approach when facing a new integration? I like this one because it's process oriented. So are there some steps that you always follow whenever you're about to do a new integration? And I'll start with Orla.
Yeah, well, try to get it working as fast as possible. And I mean, not the whole functionality, but just get a connection. Just get that connection working. Don't think about anything else. First, make sure that that connection is working. And again, because it's usually authentication issues that are slowing you down and not functional stuff. And once you have that connection, then start thinking about your architecture, your functionality, best practices, whatever. Get it working, and then you can plan everything else.
That makes sense. Rúben, anything that you would recommend to always do?
Yeah, it's mainly it's to you need to focus what you need to implement. So if you open an API reference, you'll get lost with a lot of references that you have there. So focus what you need to build. And as Orla said, after that, you have your functionality working, start programming the rest.
Awesome. Well, I know I learned a lot today. This was some really, really great insights. Thank you so much, Orla and Rúben, for joining us and sharing all of your knowledge. There's a lot of combined years of OutSystems experience here, and it's been really great to get to dig into that. So thank you again for joining us today.
Yes, thank you. And before you go, sorry, will we see you at 1?
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Perfect. Okay, so if people can meet you in
course.
person at 1, we can get the gang back together.
Excellent. So
Yes.
make sure you say hi to Orla and Rúben when if you see them there.
Thank you both.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Well, before we sign off, we do have a few more updates to share from the community. First up, we make sure that you tune in again here on YouTube Live tomorrow, August 28th, for our next episode in the AI Dev Series. Now, if you've been following along, the AI Dev Series is a really, really technical, interesting series that leads up to the Build for the Future hackathon and allows you to learn more about working with AI. And it's in partners. We have some really great partners that are working with us as well, such as Microsoft and AWS. So the next episode is on retrieval augmented generation and how to use RAG to integrate with your own knowledge bases and use large language models in order to answer questions that you can ask an application. So tune in tomorrow, and if you subscribe to our YouTube channel, then you'll be able to get that notification when they go live.
So are Kuala Lumpur and Bengaluru a bit of a hike for you? Well, we have a few events coming up that might be in your neighborhood. Come to a local user group in Frankfurt, Paris, Brussels, Utrecht, Atlanta, Mumbai, or New York City. We have sessions on front end, AI, event-driven architecture, cybersecurity, DevOps, and more for you. And we'd love to see you there.
Awesome. I will actually be at the Atlanta user group. So if you are local, please come and say hi. I'm looking forward to meeting more of our community here in the ATL. And finally, if you don't want to have to wait for Decoded Live to get all of your updates on these great events, user groups, resources, live streams that we're doing, you can subscribe to our developer newsletter. So our developer newsletter is available by email, or it's now also available on LinkedIn. It includes resources, upcoming events and trainings, job listings, and more. So you can subscribe either on our LinkedIn page for OutSystems, or you can go to outsystems.com/community to get this monthly newsletter in your inbox. So make sure that you go online and subscribe today so that you can find out about all the juicy, exciting OutSystems developer news.
Absolutely. So thank you all for joining us for this 3rd episode of Decoded Live. We've really had a blast. Our next 3 episodes will be a bit special. Tune in starting September 10th for Decoded Road to 1. We're presenting 3 technical sessions featuring 4 expert developers from our community, so you can get a little taste of what to expect at 1. These sessions will not be live, but we are attempting to shoot them in one take, so please keep us in your thoughts. Be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel to get notified when each episode drops, and we'll probably also be posting about that on LinkedIn and Twitter, so follow us there as well. Until then, have a lovely rest of the season, and we will see you at 1.
Thanks, everyone. Good to see you. Thanks for joining.